Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of The Watch. A great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, there's that conversation between Watts and Carson, what I think is so fascinating, because obviously it's like, all right, we're going to burn this city down. But the whole problem is like, for him, it's a self-preservation situation, because for him, it's like, I guess because he's kind of always been kind of a nothing and a no one, but now it's going to be a situation where kind of, because he's in a position where I didn't want this, but I was forced to be something I don't necessarily want to be, because if I don't do this, the people I work for are going to erase me from everyone's mind and memory. It's going to be like I never existed. So to preserve his own self-preservation, he's willing to let the entire world burn, because Watts is like, well, then where are we going to live afterwards? It's like, you're basically going to burn the world, burn this city, but it's also like, you doing this, and it's something I brought up before, which it's such a fascinating thing when Watts kind of breaks it down of like, basically, Sam is an abnormality in the multiverse, and in the sense that like across the entire multiverse, which speaks volumes, like across the multiverse, that his good leads to the power of the Watch and inspiration, even in that other dimension. Like, I guess you would say like the good that was kind of in him not to pull the trigger allowed Carcer to step. I don't know. Maybe you could still look at it as that. Which even I'm kind of like, I think I brought it up last episode. It was kind of sad for Carcer that like there was a universe where he was good, but that was the only universe where like he probably felt like he was kind of something of kind of no. Once again, it's like if there's notions of good and evil, then what does that make him after all that he's done? But it's like, for Carson, he feels like it's too late to turn back, but she's like, no, like, what you could do now, but like he doesn't want to listen to her. In fact, stabs her, left her for dead. He was like, I promise once, I'm not going to forget you. So there's that. There's a whole situation of like trying to warn people, hey, the dragon's on the loose, and it takes Ramkin. It's like, if you don't want you and your children to get burned, move it. And it's like, luckily, people start moving. There's a whole Lady Ramkin thing where she's like, where Lady Ramkin, not Lady Ramkin, Lord Vetinari is like, oh yeah, here's this special place inside the Watch's prison. It's like, yeah, this is Vetinari's like special hideaway place. It's like, wait, what? You're just gonna hide away? It's like, yeah, so you deal with all that, and try not to die. Vetinari's like, yeah, right, that part too. It's like, and Sam's like, you're just gonna like stay back here while basically the entire city's fending for itself. It's like, okay, shows what kind of leader you are, because even the place Vetinari has is pretty sprucey, and it's just like, especially when you compare the inside to the outside of the. I even love Vetinari being like, yeah, people think I'll be tortured in here, and like I'm in so much pain, so they can't see in here, so I'm just gonna every once in a while get close to the door and just kind of scream out in pain and agony, even though I'm living a life of luxury in here. So it's like a leader's supposed to, if they fail to protect their city, they need to be stripped of like all their things, as well as like I guess their position and everything associated with that, but also they should be willing to sacrifice their life. But Vetinari is like, I'll do only the second part of that, so hiding away. So now it's like, okay, so how do we deal with this dragon situation? Which you immediately have, I love the whole thing of, well, for one, it's a cute moment when Carrot is talking to the mirror and wants to, tell Angela how he feels. And it's like, oh, let's role play a little bit. And he's like, Angela, he's like, you're cool, and she's nearby, and she smiles. I was like, oh, that's so cute. But also when they're like, all right, like we need to find out where the dragon's going to go. So, because Watts ends up giving them a pinpoint of like, okay, this is actually where he's going to go. We need to stop him. And it's like, all right, we need someone to distract him. And so you have Carrot be like, all right, I got to tell you something, guys. I'm a virgin. And everyone's looking around for a second. It's like, what? No, that's surprising. And I'm like, them all saying that makes you feel worse and worse for him, especially because Spike is like, oh my God, you just seem like you were the most sexually experienced person. I'm shocked by this information. It's just, you feel so bad for Carrot. But it's like, all right, we're going to need not just one virgin. So Carrot goes to Sally and is like, hey, Sally, where's the other virgins of you? How many virgins do you have in your group? And she's like, one more. But then Anguish shows up, and it's like, you got to dig them up. And he was like, well, dig them up? What does she mean by that? And even Sally's like, really? Like, oh, I guess she was like, oh, you're so kind-hearted. You thought like, oh, it was just a group I got together of virgins, not realizing I bled them dry and sucked up all their blood and they're dead. But then there's a back and forth, and then the carrot's like, what are you doing? And then like Sally's like, what are we doing? Because they're like snarling and hissing back at each other. And also with like they had that cute moment where it's like, you know, he's trying to explain to like Angela about everything. Because she was saying, like, yeah, if the predator's chasing after you, don't look behind you because the predator's going to think they've won. But, and she's trying to have this heart-to-heart moment with him, and then Sally shows up, and it's like, yeah, so what happens, so this thing is, you know, like, what happens if we stop this thing? Like, it's going to protect all the, it's like, and then, like, Engel was getting so annoyed, it's like, this is our moment, you're ruining it, Sally, and then she kind of, I forgot what she was saying exactly, but she was basically like, it's not just going to be the virgins that are spared. Everyone, you know, being a virgin doesn't matter. And he looks at her, Carrot's like, it doesn't? She's like, of course not. And Sally goes on and it's like, but then, like, you know, if the dragon's dealt with and virgins still keep going missing, and then, like, Englewood got upset and was like, then we'll investigate it. And she's like, yes? Yeah. And just, like, that moment between them, I love that. I guess that was her payback to later on because it's like virgins charge, but like because Carrot was supposed to be, you know, leading the charge of the virgins, but I guess Sally was like, nah, I'm gonna let you guys do your thing. I'm gonna keep my virgins, just, you know, snack on something just in case things kind of go for the worst. Because everyone's trying to do their thing. Because yeah, Throat, she's apparently the head of the Thieves Guild now, but it's like, literally the city's about to get burned. Why are you trying to do all this stuff now? It's like, it's not all going to matter. It's like, but you might as well get what you can. And that's how they ended up finding Wants earlier in the episode. But there's a whole Sherry thing. Like, I was actually surprised, like, because, like, obviously Gawain and, like, you know, the whole Gawain and Carson thing where Carson's walking and Gawain's like, all right, if you're going to do this, I want some new rules for the world that basically there's going to be, like, a place of worship where basically, the way he was applying it sounded like, oh, everyone's going to bang it out around this place of worship to me. And Carson's just like, shut up. And it's just like, this, and when he's channeling it, the power and everything, and summons the noble dragon, and basically it's like, ignore what he said, noble dragon, Gawain or Wayne. It's like, disregard what this dickhead says and just kind of do whatever you want. And it's like, oh, it worked. But then he's like, oh wait, that backfired. And so even Carcer got burned. And there was that moment with Sherry, which I thought was interesting, where like everything's kind of flashing in front of Sherry. It seemed like it was a oh, your life is flashing before your eyes type of thing. But I'm gonna get to what I think of that in a second. And obviously, it looks like Sherry got eaten or burned by the dragon. Carcer luckily survived, but he looks at this as an opportunity, like, oh, the fact is I'm alive. I get to watch you die, and that means I win. Because I guess for him, he feels like across the entire multiverse, Sam always wins. That I guess even in his thought process in the multiverse, in the dimension where he ended up being a part of the Watch, that I guess it's still somewhat Sam's victory. So I guess it's like, because Sam is so important to everything, like everything kind of sadly like I said, Sam's this anomaly that causes so much good and stuff, and I think for Carcer, and it's like my very existence is threatened and on the line, but you're finding day, you get to just live your life, and it's like I have to be cast in the role of the villain if I want to preserve my own existence. So, but it kind of looks like they don't really have much they can do in this situation because they're like, we have no idea what to do. Luckily, Sherry shows up and she's back, no beard and everything. I guess he got burned off, but it's like, oh yeah, the dragon spit me out because I was too experienced. I didn't took that as like, is that just supposed to be sexually, which could be, but I'm also wondering, could it stem from Sherry, when she was connected to the darkness, she got tapped into, because the darkness was like a element of the multiverse, so like maybe some of that kind of rubbed off her, because like the experiences of all the different versions of herself across the multiverse, maybe when the dragon ate her, he was basically eating everything associated with it, so Sherry ends up getting spit out, and it's like she had figured out that the noble dragon was making the same sounds as Good Boy, because it's basically a song, because both are them lonely, like finally understand. Kind of love Sherry being like, yeah, it was kind of like a lot of the dragons like roaring rah, and me just oh no, like, but it's like it was kind of like a lot of that back and forth, and being like, yeah, she understands the dragon, that the dragon is lonely, like the dragon is like a caged animal that's backed into a corner. It's going to fight and be a little feral and just go berserk. So it's like if they want to save the day, Sherry's plan is to basically draw the dragon in and then get Good Boy to kind of, maybe them finding each other will kind of mend some fences and everything will be okay. And, the band gets together. Side note, I like this because I love he pops in a little bit, but he's kind of useless in every episode to a certain extent, and I'm sure that would depress him so much to hear that. It's Death. He literally pops up and it's like, all right, come here, you're going to tell, like, who are these beings? And he's like, oh, so just because I'm the embodiment of like a supernatural being that you think that every unknown phenomena I'm cool and tight with, and it's like, well, aren't you? He's like, I wasn't saying all that, but are you? And it's like, he's like, you got to help us save the day or whatever. And it's like, are you going to help us? And then like Death stands up and is like, can I join your band? And he's like pissed off. And the Death's like, that's not nice. I'm just like, and he literally pissed off for the episode. I'm like, dude, I love how like sensitive you are about certain things and you're just kind of useless. I guess it's like, well, there's not much I could do. He ends up bringing up the fact is you can't really say those beings' names. I just kind of refer to them as the observers, but I guess the observers is kind of where they're located. It's like, oh, this is like an observer's place, but that's not their actual name. Because it's like, yeah, they have many names, but basically if you say any of those names, it'll melt any human's mind who hears it. He was like, my mind's been melting for 20 years, but besides the name. But yeah, they put on a performance. The band gets together again. And I love that they're basically playing the opening theme song. And Sherry's killing it. And, and they're playing the song to kind of draw the dragon in. And so when they finally do, they let Good Boy go. And I love that when Good Boy gets up there, he actually does like a little dance, a little flip and everything. It's super adorable. And then we see like the noble dragon's eye turn into a heart. And it's like, oh, sparks. So it's like, did they fall in love? It's just like, hey, here's a kindred spirit. You're a dragon. I'm a dragon. Is it more than that? Is it just kind of like let's be friends. Yeah, let's go, off into the sunset together type of thing. I don't know whether that was romantic or just like, hey, we're just not alone. Maybe it's not a romantic thing. Maybe it's just like, hey, we're buddies now. I mean, because a Good Boy's a boy, and I guess the Noble Dragon's a girl, so I don't know if there's any implications of like what that could be, but it was super adorable as they were flying away. The camera kind of stops, and Good Boy looks at the camera and kind of winks, and it's like, oh, Lady Ramkin having to say goodbye to Good Boy. They've been together for so long, But I also appreciated that her and Sam made some plans of like, she's like, do you have any plans after this is all? He's like, plans. And he's like, oh, plans. And she's like, yeah. I'm just like, ooh. So granted, there's no like resolution where it's like, hey, Sherry and, not Sherry, Carrot and Angela, like whether there's anything there. Obviously we lean into the whole, Lady Rampkin and, Sam thing, sure. But then we have the complicated thing of, because Carcer failed, he is getting wiped away. Because the moment, like, once his wound healed, it's like, right, everything associated with him is supposed to disappear. He did stab you, so that includes this wound. And he's like, I'm sorry. And she's like, I won't forget you. I was like, that's sad because you actually are. And he kind of, like, got Thanos snapped away. Which immediately, that's when you see people fading away bit by bit like that, that's always going to be probably, in my mind, that might be the next pop cultural thing of like seeing someone like disappear like that. Definitely like that, but probably just a whole bunch of people disappearing, just anyone disappearing like that. You're just like, oh, they just got snapped. I mean, to be fair, it's been memed like crazily in many different regards, especially like, I feel like the one I see the most is like Peter, Spider-Man from Infinity War, that one in particular, because that's the one that kind of gutted people a lot. Regardless, tangents and all that. But what surprised me was that Once Remembered, and I'm like, why is that? Is it because of like maybe some kind of enchantment she put on herself, like that's just naturally there that felt that? Or could it have been like they had a special connection? Was it because he actually stabbed her and it left? Well, because the wound went away and everything, but I was wondering maybe that had some part to do it. Like, why is she the only one that remembers? And now reality's kind of rewritten around that. Like, everything that was kind of on Carcer, she was kind of an accomplice to it. And it's like, hey, I was on your side. But now it looks like everything that's ever going down in this new rewritten reality is she's the one that's been behind, like, the Noble Dragon and everything. It's like, wait, you don't remember Carcer? You said we were on the same side. She's like, let me go or I'm going to basically blow this up. And it's like, okay. And now she's kind of working with those beings. It's like, give me the power to destroy the watch. so are you doing this because it's like, oh, like, you're the reason why Carcer's going. His whole thing was about taking you down, and now it's like, oh, you want to see me as a villain? Then fine. You want me to be in a role, I'm casting the role of the villain now, then fine, I'll embrace it. I don't know, and just like, you were just kind of like, I'm gonna work with you to stop Carcer, but now you've stopped Carcer, and now it's like, oh, you see me as a villain, because in this world, that's all she is now, because she's the one responsible for everything. Carcer isn't, because he doesn't exist. He never existed. Because it's even like the whole Sam thing, it's like, the history Carcer and Sam had, she's the one filling that void. So I guess those, either just because she naturally flowed into becoming that, or I guess reality needed to pick someone and it picked her. I'd assumed it was those beings like, well, you were kind of part of this anyway, so I don't know if that was their way to kind of throw her under the bus. Because even they were like, oh, when Carcer stabbed her, they're like, oh, didn't see that coming. But one was like, oh, they kind of went down the way I expected. And the one was like, yeah, sure it did. You know, so also showing like even they aren't able to see and calculate every single thing, that there are things that slip through their blind spot. So that in its own right is really interesting. But on top of all of that, Vetinari is talking about changes that are happening in town now. That basically the Watch and the guild leaders need to show up, because obviously because of there not being a leader to the Assassin's Guild, there needs to be someone there to fill that vacuum. And even saying the quotas are now lowered. So there's crime that they can still get away with, but if they go past that quota, that means that, hey, the Watch can come after them. So it's like, yeah, there's still a lot of crime they can't do stuff about, but that means there's still stuff that they can do something about, kind of go hard after them about certain things. So that's interesting, especially because there was a whole conversation between Lady Ramkin and Sam about, like, she's like, if I had the power, I will kind of make things better. If I had that power, I would do good with it. And Sam's like, I trust you. And she's like, but we don't always agree and everything like that. But he's like, you're 1,000 times like smarter and kinder of a person than I am. So he believes in her that she'll do, like, because she was like, because you didn't want the power, maybe someone like you should leave. But for him, it's like, because I know what kind of person you are at your heart. Like, yeah, you will do the right thing. You always will. So he trusts and believes in that. So. And we kind of see that to a certain extent, because she's the one changing things, where it's like, okay, like, she wants to be the one to administer the test, and it's like democratic kind of election for the next head and of the Assassin's Guild. And for her, she looks at this as an opportunity to kind of like, further kind of change things even more. Like, slowly but surely, they're chipping away at the way things have kind of been run prior to now. So that's interesting. I'm surprised Vetinari just wasn't too... I guess, well, because the means of controlling the dragon are kind of gone forever. The badge, which is actually kind of sad when you actually think about it, considering what that badge represented. But that, combined with the helmet, as well as Gwaine, I guess we'll never see him again, because I guess he's just in the belly of the dragon, because the dragon got rid of the things that could control it. So I guess that's kind of the thought and justification for that. But... so that's just interesting. But they having their moment, and it's just kind of a thing of him being like, oh, I saw this moment, us older here, the future, and they both get a little nervous. She's like, oh, wine? And he's like, yeah, sure. And so it's like he's trying to spruce himself up. I even love later on, she's like, why does your skin always look terrible? But I love that she goes back in, she gets attacked. I was like, no, because at first I was nervous. I was like, it's the end of the episode near about. I was like, you're going to kill her? And I was like, don't do this. This is going to be, especially because he's having his, like, buffoonery outside. I'm like, don't let this be like her getting attacked. But luckily she defended herself, and it's like, oh, both the head of the Assassin's Guild as well as her right hand ended up get trapped down the pit. I even love the little girl hanging on, being like, no, okay, you're a good singer. And then like later, I guess like maybe that's supposed to be the pit to where she's like reforming people. I believe that's what that pit is, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it just drops them somewhere else. Whatever the case may be. Maybe they're dropped to their death. It's like, okay, and pretending like she didn't see them and stuff like that. And then as they get back, and she's like having this moment with him, it's like, oh, your scrawny legs. And he's like, whoa, what about my scrawny legs? She's like, oh, don't worry, put some nutrients on them. And he's like, they're getting close. He's like, he's like, Sybil. She's like, Sam, Sybil, you've got a fork in your back. She's like, what? I did? Don't worry, I'm going to change that. And if I get back here and you're still here, then that means you're mine. I was like, oh, that's super adorable. But sadly, Sam got teleported away, and she's like, Sam? And I hope she doesn't take that as I guess there's no us. Hopefully it just turns into a thing of, hey, you guys seen Sam? Nope, haven't seen Sam. Turns out, hey, those beings have him now. because once he was like, I thought you said you weren't our enemy. She's like, I wasn't, implying like I wasn't, but now I am. But also now they brought him here because I guess they figured if they can take him out of like at least one reality, then because that's also the thing too, because once had that thought like, hey, like maybe changing this one reality will alter everything. So maybe that's what they're doing now by removing Sam from the equation and making it so that Watch doesn't become the symbol of hope that it eventually does, that it breaks everything down across the multiverse. That's what Wants was worried about. So maybe she took that concern and everything and presented it to them. Like, that's what I still don't 100% understand why you're fully embracing being the enemy. You were the one that was trying to convince Carcer, but maybe potentially in the future we'd kind of potentially dive into that. But presents a very interesting situation that it's like, oh, you're confronted by the beings that basically want to stop you because you basically inspire so many people, and what the ramifications for that could be. Them, because it seemed like their whole thing is almost like not directly interfering, and it seems like by taking Sam, they're directly interfering. So, and also, what about Death? Like, is he going to ever play an important role? I mean, I guess he pops in and kind of inadvertently helps, but it kind of seemed like kind of mostly useless. It's just kind of like he's like the goblins. Almost just seems like a gag character to a certain extent. So I'm just curious, like, could he potentially help out in this situation? Like, what's this confrontation potentially going to lead? I'm curious. At the time of me recording it, it is unclear whether or not The Watch is returning for a second season or not. I hope that it does. I'd love to see what they would do with the second season, especially where they've kind of like dealt with the Carcer thing, but kind of had Watts kind of step in the role of antagonist, as well as these beings like trying to understand what they're really trying to do, snuffing out hope. Like I said, like before, the explanation seemed like they're more about logic rather than people kind of being hopeful and leading by their heart. It's almost like they want kind of a what would I was about to say unitarian. Oh God, I'm going to butcher the word, so I'm not even going to embarrass myself by trying to say it. But like a place where it's just completely ruled by science and logic, and not like the more like arts and just free. Like maybe in their mind, like being able to lead by your heart and hope is so hippie-ish. We need a disciplined and scientific and logical world. Like, I don't know, like, who are they to really... I mean, they're these observers, but maybe they think in the long run this is better across the multiverse. Because I guess it's like, if they can change it in this one place, and like I said, maybe they had the same thought as Wants, or maybe, like I said, Wants influenced their thought, that maybe it could ripple out across the entire multiverse. Which I'm also curious, like, would Sherry's... darkness ever play a role in that, since it's connected to the multiverse in some shape or form? I mean, that might be the means of helping get to Sam, and potentially, because it's like if he does get popped back into his world, like, has he been gone for a long time? Because it seems like with Carcer, like, it was never like, oh, they can just kind of pinpoint you anywhere. But I'm wondering, is it going to be kind of like a TARDIS situation where it's like, it might not return exactly when you left, so like when he comes back, it might be months, and much of the Watch and Lady Sybil has moved on as well, like but it also like the Vetinari, because obviously we've seen like Vetinari is just kind of like, oh, I'm in this for myself, didn't help when the city was in danger, but still leader and stuff. So like, what kind of happens on that front, if anything? Obviously we're focusing on this one city. Is the entire story going to take place in the city? Is it going to expand out? Obviously we're going multiverse, but are we going like to the outer reaches? Because I think they've talked about like outside of the city, just like the actual world that the Watch takes place in. But I don't know. I just more than anything, I just love to see like what the story is, what shenanigans they get up to next season, where Angua and Carrot would go, like especially like all the stuff Carcer was talking about with Carrot becoming the captain and everything, like what potential will happen down that route. Are we completely done with Carcer? Is there a potential of ever getting him back? Probably not. I mean, he exists in other universes, not less when he was wiped from this one, he was wiped from other ones. I'd assume not, but, maybe one similar to, I don't know, maybe he was kind of an abnormality in the sense that he was the one Carcer across the multiverse they went to. A lot of questions. Like I said, at the end of the day, I hope they bring this back for a second season. I'd love to see what they do with it. Once again, I know people who are more familiar with the books are very mixed probably on the show just because it's not what the books are. Once again, I don't have a reference of the books, so I just enjoy the show for just being what it is. But for some people, they might feel like, oh, this doesn't live up to the books. But, you know, people are entitled to feel that way, especially if you're a fan, because apparently there were like a lot of novels in this, the Discworld series, so... Like I said, those are just my opinions on it, you know. So I don't expect everyone to agree or feel how you want to feel about it. You know, you have that right to. So, but like I said, personally, I would like to see a season 2. So we'll just have to keep an eye out and see what ultimately ends up happening. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.